Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
We made so much progress. We continue to make progress, and I really do give credit like JP Morgan as an organization, just phenomenal women's network and the work that we're doing, but just a number of other organizations across this ecosystem and what they're doing, whether it be promoting women in small business, whether it be having a network and workshops, women that have left the workplace and coming back into the workplace, having those types of programs available for them. So there's so much out there that's available, but how do we make that more visible? How do we get more women engaged?
That was Marilu Gaudio, the president of Chase Merchant Services Canada, and she is my special guest on this episode, episode 240 of the Leaders in Payments podcast. This is our second episode in our series on women leaders in payments. Marilu grew up with first-generation Italian immigrants in a traditional Italian household focused on family and food. In fact, she credits her father for her amazing work ethic that has gotten her so far in her career. Marilu and her team work closely with the Canadian Payment Network, corporate and franchise organizations, as well as financial institutions and technology partners to both integrate and optimize payments. When it comes to her guiding principles, she cites integrity, honesty, and resiliency as her top three. She also strives to always show up as a student, not an expert, in both life and business. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Marilu. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast. And more specifically, thank you for participating during our Women Leaders in Payments month.
Greg, it's great to be here and thank you so much for sharing this conversation. I am looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, me too. So first, tell our audience about your role today, and then we'll rewind and we'll talk about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I oversee the Canadian Merchant Services business here in Canada. I have been with Chase for 15 years, and with our organization, we are a full acquirer, which means we provide payment services and solutions across small business to large enterprise clients. We have a team of professionals ranging from business development, relationship managers, product, consulting, and support functions for all of our clients. We work really closely with the Canadian Payment Network, corporate and franchise organizations, as well as FIs, associations, and technology partners, integrating the payment ecosystem and offerings that we offer. We have an amazing team here in Canada, and I'm really proud of the team that I get to work with every day.
Awesome. All right, we're going to rewind a little bit and we're going to kind of start at the beginning. So where did you grow up and what was your life like growing up?
Okay, so I was born and raised in Toronto, and I grew up with first-generation Italian immigrants and grew up in a very traditional Italian household with aunts and uncles and cousins and extended cousins at the core. And so everything was about family and food and getting together. We had a great support unit, guests visiting all the time. I also have family in Italy, and growing up, because my mom's mom was in Italy, we got to spend a lot of our summers visiting my grandmother. And so that was a ton of fun and got to explore, so many wonderful places in Italy and just the foundation, of my upbringing and some of the values. My dad, he had this incredible work ethic, which I attribute much of my discipline related to my work, and whether that be, just being independent, how to navigate through things, learning things, how to be challenged or challenge myself. So I was very fortunate. I had amazing parents and amazing family. I have an older brother and we have a great relationship. He was a very protective older brother, but also, challenged me in a lot of ways to make sure how to do things, how to make sure that, you protect yourself, how to make sure that you know how to do things like, change a tire, if you have a flat tire. So yeah, I was very privileged in having an amazing family and upbringing.
Awesome. Well, when you were growing up, would you consider yourself more like the lemonade stand builder, or were you more like the planner organizer of the Friday night out with the friends?
Oh gosh, I can say with 100%, 100%, definitely not the planner or the organizer. In fact, one of the things I think that would drive my friends absolutely bananas would be they would make the plans. They would spend a lot of time in coordinating, and then I would jump in and be like, yeah, no, let's not do that. Let's do this instead. So definitely not the planner organizer. I would definitely say more the lemonade stand builder, and just having the mindset of, hey, if there's something that I need, how do I go about getting it? What do I need to do to set up? Who do I need to make sure is interested and is, following the same path? So yeah, no, definitely not the planner, 100%, more the lemonade stand builder.
Okay. All right. And so this next question, your very first job. So I will go ahead and admit my very first job. So I wasn't even able to drive, but my mother at the time ran the lunchroom of a local college. So she got me the job, I think at age 15, of washing pots and pans. So my very first job was the summer working in a university washing pots and pans. So what was your very first job?
Oh, that's amazing. Look at that. The very first job that I had, I worked at a daycare. So similar to you, I worked at a daycare where I was enrolling the kids. So, if the kids were at school and then after school, they would come to the daycare, just making sure that I registered them wherever I needed to provide help, whether it be in the kitchen or cleaning up after the kids. That was my very, very first job as a young teenager. And I had thought then, it's so funny that you mentioned that, but it was all that work behind the scenes. And, that was always really interesting. But working with the kids and getting a chance to spend time with the kids, I thought, oh gosh, this could be something, one of the many things that I thought I would do in my career growing up. I thought perhaps this is something that I would do in the future, become a teacher or, something along interacting with children. Obviously, I didn't take that path, but the early stages of my career, that was, one of the paths that I thought that I would be pursuing. That was one of my very first jobs.
That's great. That's great. So let's move forward a little bit in your life. And you started your payments career, I think, at Chase Merchant Services in Canada. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but was there something around payments at the time that was interesting to you? Or was it more like, hey, there's an opening at this company and I'm going to interview for it? Or because I know when I started at Chase Payment Tech, this goes back to like 2006, I kind of just fell into the job. I certainly didn't look at payments as a career, which a lot of people do that today. So just curious, was there something about payments back then? Or was it more like there was this job that you heard about and you were interested in it?
That's such a great question, Greg. And when I think back, so I actually started my career in the financial sector. And so I had worked with one of Canada's top 5 banks and started, at an entry level position. It was a part-time job while in school, trying to gain some experience. And similar to you, I kind of just fell into the position and then just grew throughout my career into the financial sector. And so my original position was a part-time position, and I was covering for a woman who was on maternity leave. That position then became a full-time position, and then I led multiple positions within the banking services. And what's so great about financial services in general is just the wide range of opportunities across the different lines of businesses. And so, that includes personal banking or commercial banking, treasury services, investment banking, wealth management. There was just so many opportunities within the bank. And there was an opportunity within the payment space, and the payment space was not something I had experience in, but it was very intriguing to, just hear more about the payment space, some of the really cool things that they were doing in the payment space at this particular financial institution that I worked at. And so I pivoted from the banking side of things into the payment side of things. And it was really because There were a couple of roles that were available, and I thought, hey, this is an industry I'm not familiar with. This is an industry, let me learn a little bit more about that industry. And then, 20 plus years later, I'm still in the industry. And there were so many opportunities within the payments industry alone, similar to just in general within the bank, but within the payments industry, whether it was back office, whether it be client facing, whether it be finance, whether it be credit, there was all these different avenues that one could pursue. And what was really cool about the payments industry, it was a very niche market at the time. The top banks, they all had an acquiring division, and they, I'm going to say probably up until the early 2000s, most of the banks were still in the acquiring industry. And then what ended up happening was you had some of these really big U.S. acquirers that were starting to make their way within the Canadian space. And some of these, most of the Canadian banks decided to exit their acquiring business and sell to these U.S. acquirers. And, fast forward 20 years later, and here we are, and, you have a number of different payment processors, global international presence, fintechs now not making their way, they are here. And so it's evolved a great deal, but it's always really been a very interesting industry for me. It continues to be a very interesting industry. We've seen how much the payments overall ecosystem has evolved, how it's continuing to evolve, and how so many things now are at the core of payments. So it's a pretty cool, fun, exciting industry. And it's been a 20 plus year career within this industry.
So when you started at Chase, what area of the business did you start in?
I started in relationship management. So I joined Chase in 2008, and we had a relatively small relationship management group, and Chase was really growing market share in the Canadian landscape. And so I joined with the intent of, growing our relationship management team, servicing and the expansion of our client base. And then, from there, relationship management, client services, also responsible then for, business development within the national space, partnerships. We have amazing clients and amazing partners here. And I've just had the privilege of, working with the customers that we have and our employees over the years. So the role obviously started off in relationship management. It grew into a number of different areas of responsibility, including, some of those that I've cited, as well as, small business, loyalty and retention. And so it was a really diverse portfolio that I was able to be responsible for and oversee over my tenure here.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us to today. And obviously, you've been quite successful throughout your career. So what would you say are your guiding principles?
So my guiding principles and foundation for me and my style and just the way I like to interact with people, and in turn, how, I ideally like to have people interact with me. First and foremost, integrity, honesty. I think those are core and at the foundation of, who I am and the expectations I have, but also just, the ability to be resilient. Many times in our industry and in life for that matter, you just have to be prepared to pivot. And what does that mean? And how do you plan for that? How do you make sure people are aligned? How do you make sure people are prepared for that? In addition, I always like to be prepared to the best of my ability, regardless of what it is, whether I'm working with a client, whether I'm entering into a meeting, whether it be entering into a work session. I always want to make sure that I'm well prepared. I have all my facts. I have the level of information I need in order for me to make informed decisions. It's important for me to listen and hear what people have to say, to be inclusive. And then for me personally, it's just what's really critical, I think, just in general, is continuing to learn new things, to be challenged. Those are, really, I think, at the foundation of my principles on a regular basis. The other thing I would say that's really important is just surrounding yourself. This is really both personally and professionally. I really like to surround myself with people with positive energy, positive intent. I have been very fortunate. I have an amazing team of people who share the same guiding principles. And there are so many moments that we encounter that, whether they be good times or challenging times, the ability to work in collaboration, share a vision, have, equal-minded individuals that are driven to get things done for our people, for our clients. Those are things that are incredibly important to me. Have been, will be, and will always continue to be.
We've all heard the terms embedded payments or integrated payments, and of course, it's a huge trend in our industry. But the truth is, there's so much more to the story. So in collaboration with NMI, the fully integrated payment solution built to scale, we've launched the Be Solid campaign, where we're exploring embedded finance with guests from leading companies like KeyBank, Bain Capital Ventures, and more. To listen to the latest episodes, visit leadersinpayments.com or nmi.com/resources/podcast. In a world full of squares and stripes, be solid. Next question is kind of about those eye-opening moments in your career. I think we've all had them, and I certainly have. So maybe could you talk about a few of those eye-opening moments in your career?
Oh gosh, where do you start with that, right, Greg?
Right.
There are so many eye-opening moments for sure. But I would say, earlier in my career, I felt like I always had to be the expert on everything. And I felt like I always needed to get into the micro details, had a hard time trusting anybody. Like if I wasn't doing it, would it get done right? Would people give it the same level of attention that I would? And just incredibly particular in terms of my quality of work. And so what I've learned throughout my career, and it certainly comes with experience for sure, is that I don't have to be the subject matter expert on everything. Surrounding yourself with strong people and asking the right questions and the right level of information to make informed decisions. That for me was one of those things where it's like, oh, wait, it's okay. You can let go. You can give people, full autonomy. You just have to make sure that there's, a certain expectation of things that if you're looking for information or requesting of certain things to make decisions, the format in which it's done, the type of information that you're looking for, the level of information that you require. And, that just helps everybody just be more productive. The people that are coming to you to make decisions and people that want to make sure that you're informed with those decisions, those sessions become much more productive and way more streamlined. So you're in a position where, hey, everybody's done their homework. Everybody has the facts. We're exchanging that information. The timing in which that information becomes available, how we digest that information, how we talk about what's required. It's a much more streamlined way of making decisions and leveraging people to help gather that information and be available to just make more informed decisions in a much more productive way. That's been a big eye opener for me where it's like, yeah, you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to be the person, getting all the micro details, and that, it's okay to trust people. There's much smarter people out that are doing, great work, and you just have to give people that autonomy and just make sure that you have the facts and the right information to make informed decisions. I would say that's one eye opener. Another eye opener for me is, this is probably one of those where you learn from others on things of what not to do, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so throughout my career, I've had people that I've interacted with that I've had, just a great deal of respect in terms of how they manage people, how effective they are, how successful they are, and how they operate. And I've also had people where I have not had that same level of respect and how they interact with people and different styles. And so my biggest eye-opening moments in my career as a leader and quite frankly, as a human being, and to learn from what some of those people have done and not make those same type of, I don't want to call them mistakes, but not practice in that way where it doesn't drive the same type of behavior. And, it ties back to your question earlier around guiding principles and, why those guiding principles are so important, whether that is communication style, respecting one another. I totally appreciate we are, and diverse perspectives is so critical, and we're not always going to agree, but it's how we apply, it's how we speak to one another, it's how we collaborate, it's how we come together, and, how we drive moving forward. Those are some of those things that are, just in your career. Those are some of the lessons learned and some of the eye-opening scenarios where I think that just really contributes to the person and the leader that you become.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about women leaders in payments. So what letter grade would you give our industry and why?
Such a great question. And I would say, and there's some days where I would say we're a C plus and other days where I would say we're a B minus. And on the days where, we're a C plus, it's those days where, depending on where you are, what industry event that you are, and you're not necessarily seeing the representation that can be there. But I would say that the payments industry in general has and is making progress. When I look around the Canadian landscape and I look at some of the movement at the senior level, and you look at the heads of, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they're all led by women. And I think that's absolutely amazing. And I think there are platforms in this industry that really allow for the greater visibility and recognition within our industry to help promote this just breadth of opportunity for women. And so, areas that I'd like to see more of representation include, areas like in technology, architecture within the payments industry. We're seeing progress for sure on the product design. And certainly, strong areas include like, client facing and business development. But I do think there's always room for us to do more. There's always room to, do better. There's great platforms to allow people to, get to know some of the amazing talent that we have within this industry. And so, so depending on the day that you ask me, but I'll say that the average right now is, I would say a B minus.
Okay. Well, what are the things you think as an industry that we could do better or we could do differently to make it better?
I would say continue the promotion of women in senior roles, challenge organizations to achieve like specific targets and goals, making sure that we recognize, the nuances for women in their career path and build support policies for employees, challenge organizations and get involved in active women's networks. I think those are, some things that I would encourage. I think those are things that I think are important. I think, the community, our involvement and it lead by example. I think those are all very critical.
Okay. And some of these things we've seen, right? I mean, there have been advances to your point earlier, but there are still other changes that need to happen. Like what can companies, like Chase do or other companies like to make these changes, happen? And when do you see them happening? I mean, it's easy to talk about it, but it's the execution of it, right? That's always a challenge. Like when do you see us getting to where that C plus B minus becomes an A? How do we get there and when do we get there?
And the great news is we are getting there. We're making so much progress. And I think that's fantastic. And I think the how we get there are some of the things that, that I was mentioning a little earlier. And I think, when you think of the payments industry as a whole, just the visibility around the offering of the different career options, then the financial, client-facing, architecture, technology. I think, just making the ability to have these networks available for individuals to self-promote, to network. I think those are very important because the opportunities are there And it's how do you make sure that you are going out there to attract that talent, to grow that talent, whether it be internally or externally. What tools are we providing? What avenues are we giving individuals to, enter into this space or learn this space? And I really do respect in the payments ecosystem, we have active platforms like the Women in Payments or PayTech Women, and they are amazing, platforms that offer that network availability and promotion and encouragement in terms of like, hey, these are the range of different options in this payment space. And these are like different sponsors and different leaders and different ways of, getting to know these individuals. And whether that be through, companies championing and promoting some of these organizations, or just even internally leading these types of networks for women to have a path forward, whether, it be mentor programs or sponsorship programs. So I think there's a number of different avenues and different platforms that are currently available. But how do we adopt those platforms? How do we make those platforms more visible? How do organizations internally, follow suit to offer those different types of scenarios and opportunities for others to get informed, educated, provide the opportunity to get in front of, different individuals from an exposure, from an experience perspective. So I think we made so much progress. We continue to make progress. And I really do give credit, like JP Morgan as an organization, just phenomenal women's network and the work that, we're doing, but just a number of other organizations across this ecosystem and what they're doing, whether it be promoting women in small business, whether it be having a network and workshops, women that have left the workplace and coming back into the workplace, having those types of programs available for them. So there's so much out there that's available, but how do we make that more visible? How do we get more, women engaged? And then the other thing that I think is very important is Greg, just the work, for example, that you're doing and some of the amazing women that you've interviewed, it's profiling these amazing women, the work that they're doing in this industry, how they've gotten there, the difference that they're making. And it's giving other individuals an opportunity to learn about these individuals, what they've done, their career path, how they got there. It gives them a platform. Hey, this is an individual maybe I can reach out to in LinkedIn and get some more information. But it's really providing folks a array of information where they can make some informed decisions about, hey, how do I contemplate, a career in this industry? What are the options that are available for me as an individual that wants to enter into this industry? Once upon a time, one may have thought, oh gosh, you maybe it's just on the technical side, but that's far from the case, right? Like, as I said earlier, the payments industry offers just a spectrum of different opportunities. If you want to be somebody that's client facing, you have that opportunity. If you want to be somebody within research and design, you can do that. If you want to be somebody that's rolling out and creating new products, you can do that. It's so much more than, this perception that is just one-sided. There's an array of opportunities, and there's so many women that have led the way, that continue to lead the way. And I just think it's great for women and individuals just to, when they're contemplating their career and what they should be thinking about, these are all the things that are available and for people to have some exposure to. And that helps them educate themselves in terms of what their options that are available could look like.
Yeah. And, part of our platform, we do a couple of special months every year. So we do diversity and inclusion, we do women leaders in payments, and we do financial inclusion. Those, to me, when I started this podcast, were three areas within payments that needed elevated. And I felt like right? If I could dedicate a month to those, have people on who can talk about, especially for women leaders in payments, people like you who have been successful. What are the keys to you being successful? Are there, younger females, women listening to this show that are going to hear you and something's going to resonate that you say? So trying to, I guess, broadly is provide a platform for, those three things is kind of was my goal. But, in having done this several years now, one of the things that kind of dawned on me was, we talk about women leaders, but what about the ones that are like in college, maybe like they've taken fintech courses, which of course, when I was in school, didn't exist. I don't think the word fintech existed, but you can take fintech and payment courses in college now, and you can look at this industry and say, and I think you mentioned it earlier, I mean, it's such a big, broad industry now. It's a whole ecosystem around money movement, whether you want to call it payments or fintech or money movement, it doesn't matter. I think kids are coming out of college and they're like, oh, I want to build a career. Well, let's say someone just graduating from college, they come to you and they say, hey, what do I need to do to be successful in the payments industry? What would you tell them that they should do to be successful?
Oh, and I love this question. And I love this question because I have a regular opportunity to have, this conversation, whether it be with analysts or students. It is something that, is just so important for us to be able to, coach or give advice in those scenarios. I would break it down and there's, 4 or 5. One is, get the skills. So as you, may in your career have experienced, but in the past, women weren't historically involved in what we classify as STEM. So like science, technology, engineering, mathematics, right from the early education. That's changing. And I love that. And it's great to see that's changing. So I have nieces. And so, it's always a matter of like saying to them and to others, like encouraging your daughters, your nieces, they're the future. They're the future of this industry. They're the future leaders. And their skill set in this workplace or others so valuable. So get the skills, right? Get the skills, really critical. Abilities. When we talk about emotional, social intelligence is so important. And I think what happens a lot of times is people sometimes take that for granted. And why is that important? And it's important because you need to be in a position on, how do I need to be thinking about this? Critical thinking is so imperative to think about innovation. That has nothing to do with gender. That just has to do with how you are adapting to certain things, how you need to be exposed to certain things. And then in the industry of payments, this is so important because that's how you progress in the payments industry. Communication. Communication is the one area I think for all of us, and regardless of industry, I think it is so critical to make sure that your voice is heard. If you're sitting at a table, make sure people know who you are, what you represent, and that you have an opinion. And one thing that I emphasize a lot is if you're sitting at a table and you have an opinion and you need to, make a comment or question something, don't walk away from that meeting without taking the opportunity to do that in that meeting. And not do it outside of that meeting because your voice needs to be heard during that meeting so people understand who you are and what it is that you're trying to say. And what I've seen happen is because the payments industry, and Greg, this just from your experience, the payments industry is incredibly complex. And if you're in a meeting and you think that people understand or people know and people are not asking the questions and then they're walking away thinking that they understood something and it's not what they understood, that could lead to, just more work and frustration, et cetera. So just make sure that you're communicating, you're asking questions, and that you have a voice and that your voice is heard. The other thing that I would recommend, and I do this for myself as well, is just continue to stay informed. Do your homework, do your research, know what's happening outside of just, the Canadian, for example. Yes, I'm based out of Canada, but also understand what's happening in all the different markets, whether it be in Asia, in Europe, in LATAM, US, et cetera. it's really important to stay abreast of all of the trends that are happening in the industry. And this way you are well informed. You can be a leader ahead of, the mindset of others. And it also gives you a really good indication of, hey, this is something that's super exciting that I would like, hey, maybe we're not doing this here in this country now, but, fast forward 2 years, I could play a role in contributing to that. And so I would say those are some of the things that are really important. And then the last thing that I think it just ties to what we were talking a little bit about earlier is like, just build your network. Just who are some of the key people that you need to be familiar with? How do I reach out to people on social media, whether it be LinkedIn or others? How do I participate in these women's events? How do I make sure people know who I am, what I can contribute? How do I get more informed of what they're doing, how they're doing it? Those are some of the things that I would say or give advice on. I think those are all really important.
Yeah, I think those are all very important. I can't say one would be more important than the other. I think you're right. You kind of bring it all together, and that's some great advice. Let's wrap up with this one final question. Maybe tell the audience a little bit about what Chase is doing specifically that helps foster this environment where, women can be successful and can bring their full selves to work, and be successful. So maybe talk a little bit about what Chase specifically is doing in this area.
I am so proud of the organization that I work for and the just social, economic responsibility around just making a difference. And so we have a women's network here at Chase, and it really embodies a number of the things that we talked about. But we're incredibly active on the Women on the Move effort, and it's really providing, again, a platform, a network for women to hear other women and their career journeys. We have a fast forward program that provides personal and professional development journey. We also have Men as Allies, and this is a great program that we offer where you have, men within the organization, and it's a buddy program, kind of like a mentor/sponsorship. So partnering with senior male leaders and women and employees, and we do a number of different events on that front. We're very active in sponsoring different women programs, whether it be women in payments, whether it be pay tech women, but it's just making sure that we are providing that level of support, that sponsorship, the engagement model. And, those are just some of the things that we're doing, but we're very active on this front. And we have amazing women that, volunteer their time in these programs to really make a difference, provide the ability to have different venues in order to bring women together, to make sure that women have the right tools, the women have the right information, the right, level of support in order for them to be successful. And so, it just makes me very proud to be working for an organization that takes this amongst other, social causes very seriously.
Great. Well, Marilu, we've had a great conversation so far. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Gosh, I would just say, Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I want to thank you for the difference that you're making in this platform to allow for, the different individuals that you're interviewing on a regular basis. And I think, we all take inspiration from amazing men and women and how we can influence and affect change. And so I think it's, on all of us in order to take down those blocks and open the path and just provide whatever support we can to all individuals to be successful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
For sure. Thank you so much, Greg.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.